Welcome to Educate Us, a podcast and learning collective that explores the questions shaping education. Through conversations with educators, researchers, scholars, students, and community members, we examine the relationship between learning and lived experience. Together, we explore new possibilities for education and its role in the world around us. I am Dr. Tiffany Smith, educator, curriculum designer, researcher, founder, and host of Educate Us. Thank you for joining. Let's begin. Before we engage with today's guest, I'd like to provide some context for the conversations you'll hear throughout this first Educate Us series. In 2025, Dr. Joelle McIntosh shared a post on Facebook about the future of public education and the challenges facing schools. Her comments prompt me to reflect on a fundamental question. What should schools be preparing students to know, to do, and become in a rapidly changing world? That reflection became the foundation for this series. What began as a conversation between educators soon evolved into the development of a new multimodal curriculum for secondary students. This curriculum encourages learners to observe their communities, investigate real-world questions, develop evidence-based claims, and communicate their insights across multiple forms of media. The conversations you will hear throughout this series are part of that development process. Each guest brings a unique perspective that helps test and strengthen the curriculum. Their insights help us explore what students need to know, what they need to be able to do, and how learning experiences can better connect academic content to the realities of everyday life. I invite you to listen not only to the ideas being shared, but also to the questions that emerge. Together, these conversations help shape a curriculum grounded in inquiry and real-world engagement. Therefore, without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Joelle M.W. McIntosh to episode 1 of Educate Us, titled The Problem with Traditional School Curriculum. Dr. McIntosh, affectionately known by her students as Dr. Marti, is a veteran career and technical education educator, former department chair, curriculum leader, and global education advocate with more than 25 years of experience helping students connect classroom learning to life beyond school. She is a member of the inaugural 2026-2027 Opportunity Fellows cohort with Opportunity Insights at Harvard University. She is a Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms alumna and a Global Teaching Dialogue Conference presenter. Dr. McIntosh brings a practical and visionary perspective to questions about curriculum, educational access, economic mobility, and student success. In this conversation, we discuss what effective teaching looks like in today's classrooms, how educators can connect academic learning to real-world experiences, and why students' needs should remain at the center of curriculum and instruction. We also explore the role of teachers in facilitating meaningful learning and the possibilities that emerge when schools embrace community-based learning. I hope you enjoy today's conversation. Dr. McIntosh, thank you for being here. To begin, can you tell our listeners a little about your background beyond what I've already shared and the work you currently do with students?
I think I want to share, Dr. Smith, that my work in education really is twofold. It started with my daughter, who at a very early age I recognized was what I would consider a non-traditional learner. Like, she was not going to sit in a chair and listen to somebody talk to her all day long and a sit and get type of environment. She needed something that was going to engage her. And she always asked the question, like, why? Why am I doing this? What is the purpose? And it started early. And she was not one of those kids where you're going to do it because I said so, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm a teacher and I have the knowledge and you want what I want. She was like, yeah, no, that don't work for me. So that was part of it. And then coming out of corporate America, what I saw was coming into career and technical education were students that were poorly prepared to go to work. And I kept saying, we would go into retail establishments or fast food establishments or even just entry level in places like the bank. And I was like, why are they performing so poorly? And so then you have to backwards design. You say, okay, what is education providing them with? And what is home providing them with? And if you think about for our generation, you know, we experienced a lot of the drugs in our communities and babies having babies. And there was no one at home providing this level of professional instruction, like how to dress for a job interview. Everybody wasn't in roads or in some of those pre-professional programs in high school. So where did they learn it? And to me, the obvious choice was high school because career and technical education has been around since the 30s. There's money available for it, but it wasn't being utilized the way that I thought it should be. And the more I stood in rooms saying, hey, we have this already here. There's money available, training available. Why aren't we using it? They weren't listening because I didn't have what they considered the terminal degree. So then I had to go back and get the degree. And now the research, my experience all fits together to say, hey, this is what we need and why we need it. So that's kind of how I be here.
I love that. I love that. You touched on so many important things. Definitely want to come back to this backwards design concept. I know about it as an instructional designer. I'm very aware of backwards design. I never thought about backwards design starting at home because
Our parents are our first teachers, right?
Can you speak more about that? Like how, you know that we're building a curriculum. How do we consider, especially when we have students going into a real world environment to learn, how do we consider they might not have social, like, what does that look like?
That's real, right? I mean, I think it's one of the things that education forgets. We make all the assumptions. So there's two assumptions that happen with education, right? There are people that are coming from, I'll say, affluent neighborhoods or parents that have greater access. And then there are students that come from impoverished or parents that are maybe less than maybe have not even finished high school. Sometimes we still believe like everybody has finished high school and they have not. If the parent doesn't have it, it doesn't mean they don't love the kid any less, but I can't give you what I don't have. Worked in a couple of school systems in the St. Louis area. And surprisingly, it's not just an African American issue. There are Caucasian, Latino citizens who are also like, I just finished 8th grade. That can't even do functional math, right? We're not talking about algebra 1, algebra 2. We're talking about simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. There are still parents with deficits. I went to a professional development for teachers, and the one thing the presenter talked about was some parents still have trauma, so they won't come in the schoolhouse even to support their child. So I'll call her Angela. Angela is a 3rd grade student who's struggling with math, struggling with reading. Maybe Angela moved around. She backwards designed. She missed those foundational pieces because mom was unhoused several times. So she moved. And when you talk about that in movement, different schools pace differently for different reasons. So Angela missed phonics. She missed numeracy. She missed those. So now she's in third or fourth grade, and there are notes that are coming home saying, hey, Mr. Jones, hey, Mrs. Jones, we need you to come into school to talk about Angela to give her some supports. But Mr. Jones and Mrs. Jones, they were also unhoused. They lived with grandma in Kentucky, and then they moved to Ohio with auntie because mom and dad were no longer in the picture. So they moved into this environment that didn't look like them. And so in addition to being educationally behind because they came from down south, now they're in a space that doesn't look like them, doesn't feel like them. The teacher doesn't accept them. So that's trauma. Now they done had some kids. Wow. They want to put them into the school system. They're trying to do right. I don't believe their parents say, I'm sending you to school to do wrong. They're trying to do right, but they got their own stuff. And this is at third grade. So then we send them through the system. We send Angela through the system, just like we send her parents through the system. And they get to high school, they graduate, and then they end up in a workspace. And I don't care what workspace you call it. And Angela is poorly. She struggles. My brother talked to me about working at Foot Locker. And he said he was a manager at Foot Locker, and they would get a layout of how the shoes were supposed to be put on the shelves. And it would talk about, sandals, loafers, heels, whatever. So he gives Angela this layout. And Angela looks at the layout, goes away for about a half hour. He comes back, looks at the shoes. They're not laid out correctly. He's like, the layout tells you where the shoes go. Sins goes away thinking like, oh, well, maybe she just didn't read it the first time. Comes back and the shoes are still a mess. He finally asked the question. Angela says, I struggle with reading. Now, we're not talking about medical terms. We're not talking about engineering. We're talking about shoes, black shoes, brown shoes, sandals, sneakers. We're talking about shoes. So we don't we go back to that backwards design and looking at the systems we do or do not have in place to close the gaps. And Angela is probably relegated to an entry-level position for the rest of her life. Entry level.
Especially if she doesn't get, so now, and we're not going to go there, but now we're into workplace culture, workplace professional development, workplace training.
But that's what
honestly,
CTE does.
They probably need her in that entry level role, but then she's locked in salary wise. That impacts her ability to have home ownership or
economic mobility,
this is a trickle
economic
down
opportunity. Yeah.
And this totally justifies focus on a quote unquote non-traditional curriculum that's really going to prepare them for contemporary life and contemporary work. And I stress contemporary because we don't live in the Ford era anymore.
No manufacturing.
So
I would argue that for Angela, the contemporary curriculum would tell her why she needs to go back and figure it out, get it fixed. There are programs available to support students like an Angela who need help with reading or math, but they're too embarrassed. They don't understand the why I need to go back. But when you say to me, hey, Angela, if you just acquire this level of knowledge, this will open up doors of opportunity, earning for you, possible promotion. But right now, she don't see no reason for it. And everybody around Angela looks like Angela, works like Angela. So she's like, okay, well, we all broke. So what?
Where do you think the schools are getting it right?
So there are pockets of schools across the country that understand that education needs to innovate. It needs to look and work differently based on students. I think while I'm challenged by some of the things that our government has done around education, and I know that educators going to beat me up all over the place when it comes to charter schools versus public schools. I do believe that some charter schools, when given, what is it? The ability to do whatever, I don't have the word I want to use, autonomy. When given the autonomy to work and be, they come up with really good things for kids. Those they find ways to meet them. It's not always replicable. Is that the word I want to say how I want to say it?
I
You
think
can't.
so.
Yeah. So like I think about, remember the movie Freedom Writers? And in the movie Freedom Rider, she had this whole different, she brought them together as community first. And then she used that as a way to teach. And she did all of these non-traditional things. And then there's one little secretary lady at the school who says, you can't reproduce it. How do you replicate this across the district? And the teacher, was it Hillary Swank? Is that the lady who did it? But
I don't know that detail, but I just remember the gist,
right,
of the
but
movie.
Hillary, well, whoever the Erin, I think her name was Erin. Whatever she was able to do, she was able to take some struggling learners who were at the bottom of the educational system and move them forward in using non-traditional methods. And the one thing her district said to her was, our lady within the district says, but you can't reproduce this across schools. And her comment was, I'm not trying to reproduce this across schools. I'm just trying to do what's best for my students.
What she did is she created a heart matter out of something that was supposed to be material and transaction. And so
Yes.
that says a lot about the role of the teacher. So let's go there for a minute. Let's narrow the scope a little bit to the teacher and what kind of teacher is best. And then I also, of course, want to make sure we touch on community-based learning, but I want to go there about the teacher because this is heavy, because the reason it feels so heavy for me is because I'm thinking about my role. The teacher facilitate that learning environment. And for that, in that Freedom Riders movie, it became a heart matter, and a heart matter is
Exactly.
transferable. So talk to me a little bit about the teacher in the right classroom.
So I really believe that teaching is a ministry, right? And in that, I don't believe it begins with a degree. I think it begins with that person who enters the classroom, much like you did. You see a problem, a challenge, and you really want to get behind how to fix it. And one of the things I was challenged by as I went into the classroom, especially in business, was like how much business curriculum textbooks lag behind what was happening. Like, why do I walk into a classroom in 2026 and you using textbooks from 2018? Like, so much has happened in the world since then. Why are you still digging out yellow raggedy papers of what you taught when you first entered into the classroom? Why haven't you re-envisioned it with what is currently happening in the state of the economy or
And
businesses?
how we're consuming information has changed as well.
And it moves quickly. And it's the thing I struggle with, I talk about sometimes, is Black and brown children, because they don't have access, because they're not having these conversations in their spaces, we're behind. So again, we walk into a workspace behind with social skills. We walk into the workspace behind academically. We walk into a workspace not understanding how our economics is limited and how that limits our home and limits our community. Again, it's all connected. It's all connected. And these are not the conversations that are happening in spaces where they need to.
Take us into your classroom. Show us how good teaching addresses those issues in your classroom.
So
Because I'm
recently,
already thinking about that thing at the top, but go ahead. Because I've been to your class. So.
Right. So recently we had end of course exams. So at the high school level, you have them in core content areas. And this end of course exam is supposed to measure how
Mm,
effective teaching and learning is happening in our school district. When I first started education, I would have students that just would not take these tests seriously. And I was like, do y'all understand why this is important?
mhm,
And with that, I developed and I continue to retool. So it's not perfect, but a conversation on the economics of education. And what I did in those conversations, I said, I need you to understand that test scores rate our school district. It tells the
mhm,
community immediately and the people around us how well we are or aren't performing. It's on your
mhm,
shoulders. So if you go in there and you don't do well, we look like teaching and learning is not happening in our building.
mhm,
What that says to people who are buying homes or looking at buying homes in our community, like, yo, don't go there because
mhm,
that school system is failing. Teaching and learning isn't happening. I said, and
mhm,
what happens after that? Because I need you to understand homeowner tracks. And then I said, how many of you shop next to home? Like you go to the grocery store, you go to a couple of retailers to buy your clothes, you buy snacks immediately in your neighborhood. Most of us do that. Well, when we start homes start getting sold or people aren't buying it and that revenue dries up, people stop shopping local. So
mhm.
businesses say, okay,
Yeah.
well, we're gonna leave too.
Well, they
And
don't have a
once they
choice but to leave.
exactly, and once they leave, so you're no longer getting business tax, you're not getting residential tax. And while it may not be immediate, and I say them, how many of you have been in schools that haven't had the nicest um uh environment? You see dark spots on the ceiling, or you see broken, or how many of you have driven through neighborhoods that have really poor streets? I said some of that
Mhm,
is because the educational system wasn't that they failed, the students didn't take the test seriously. I said,
mm,
so it's on your shoulders. And
mhm,
so when I start having that conversation, it doesn't happen with everyone, but light bulbs go off because they're like, oh, so we really do need to take this test seriously. Yes,
mhm,
because the teacher can't make you scribble in the color of the bubble, the A, B, C. We can't do that. We
mhm,
can't make you stay up. We can just put the test in front of you and hope that you think it's important enough to do your best. But so that's what it looks like in my class. That's a real conversation. It's
mhm,
business minded because I'm talking about economics. I'm talking about personal finance, taxation, talking about business taxes, and I'm showing them that how they matter in the space.
mhm, mhm, mhm. They definitely have to embody the work, is what I'm hearing. And they
Yes,
also need to embody their learning experience so they value the learning and the education that they're getting at that school.
yes. And it's up to the teacher to make it so.
Mhm,
Because remember, if you're dealing with a kid, like you said, that's English as a foreign language, or you're dealing with a black or brown person that comes from a maybe a teenage parent, or maybe they've been unhoused, or maybe they
mhm,
are they don't have parents, they're in the system for whatever reason, they don't have that foundational information to build on. You got
mhm,
to show it to them. You give them examples like, have you driven down this street and remember what the street once looked like and now what it looks like or what it feels like?
mhm.
You got to create the picture for them.
So what does that look like in your classroom though? Because I know you
I
have that
mean,
you are good. Does it say you are good? Is that what it
yes.
says? Okay.
So, well, that came from, it was are you good? Are you good?
Are you
That came
good?
from our
Talk about that.
building.
Yeah.
Our building did some work around mental health.
Mm,
So when you think about Black and Brown students who are disproportionately dealing with all of the things, and we can go, the things is another conversation, but all of the things that socially and emotionally impact them, you also got to create the environment because we go back to Maslow's, right? Hierarchy of
mm-hmm,
need. We talk about those first two levels. Why am I going to care about what I do in this class if I'm
mm-hmm,
concerned about what I'm going to do when I go home? Is there a
mm-hmm,
home? Is there food? Am I going to have to deal with whatever grandma, grandpa, auntie, uh, my foster care system? I got to deal with those things first before I care about what's happening in my classroom.
Unless they can see the value of the education in their life right now.
Nope. Maslow
What about
says
the mm-hmm.
Maslow says it doesn't happen until those things happen first. I can't see value in education if I'm hungry. And I don't know where I'm gonna eat tonight. You can be the best teacher ever. You can love me to death. And I know you love me. And maybe you provide a snack for me every day when I come to class, but that's when I'm in your class at 11:30.
So how do
When
we
I'm
make
at
caveats and accommodations for that? Like how do we push through, or what happens in the curriculum to consider or address that?
I don't know this curricular. I think it's about the teachers in your room, in your building, in your
Mm-hmm.
school. So when you talked about what about the teacher, and I said it's ministry, and you talked about hard work,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happening first. Because I got to look like I had a student this semester who just completely dropped off. Student was a senior,
Mm-hmm.
completely dropped off, and was on the fringe of failing. And I said, what happened? I said, write me a note. And I said, so like sometimes teachers like to be talked to a kid face to face and they don't
Mm-hmm.
always feel comfortable. So I would say, write me a note, stick it on my door. And they were like, I got a kid and I'm working nights to provide for my
Mm,
kid.
mm,
And
mm,
so I'm tired when I come to school. I know what I need to do. If you just help me out, I can get it done. And I
mm-hmm.
was like, okay, thank you for telling me, but you got to advocate for yourself, babe.
Mm-hmm.
Some people aren't going to ask the question. You got to open up your mouth. And so
So how
that
does
was
that show up in your classroom though? Like
it.
how does it,
Showed
I
I
know.
observe,
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching my students. It's not just about
Mm,
what, sometimes it's about what they turn in. Sometimes it's about how their clothing changes. Like
mm,
I
mm,
had one student who was super colorful coming to school and then dropped off and the clothes became black every single time I saw them.
mm,
That was something that was visual I could observe, and I was
mm-hmm.
like, hey, can we go out in the hallway? um there
Mm,
was a loss of life by a young person in our community,
mm-hmm.
and it wasn't in our school directly but a school adjacent to us. And I noticed the next day I had several students with their heads down, and I'm like, hey, was that connected to you in any way? And
Mm-hmm.
I would get, and this particular student, I freshman, I said, were you connect? I took them in the hallway. I said, were you connected? They said yes. I said, are you
Mm-hmm.
okay? They said yes. I said, can I give you a hug? They said yes. When I gave them a hug, they broke down in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, can I get you some help from our counseling department? Can I send you
Mm-hmm.
someplace? But that was because I was looking. I'm looking at you. I'm paying attention. So before I get to, so back to how it looks in my classroom, every
Mm-hmm.
week I start with a community check-in question. And we toss a stuffed animal around. And at the very beginning, it's real awkward because nobody want to say nothing. But I'm like, you
Mm-hmm.
can either answer voluntarily or be voluntold. And it could be things like, if
Voluntold.
if you have to describe yourself by weather, what would you say? Are you sunny? Are you
Mm-hmm.
cloudy? Are you rainy? Are you snowing? We add something to it. And then they answer that way. I even get students ask, you didn't ask the community question today. You know,
I love that. I love,
yes,
love, love that community question. I
yeah.
think that's a great way to start any exercise. Imagine they're at the Coffee Co. facility in the Grove here in St. Louis. And I'm taking into consideration this backwards design thing that you just said, where maybe they've never been to a coffee shop, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe they've never been to, they don't know what to buy, what to order, where to start. Do they sit down? Do they get in line? Do they, do they follow their peers? Do they feel comfortable alone? Like, do they need somebody with them? Like all these things I would never have considered in my curriculum. I mean, it's just not higher ed, it's just a different situation. I mean, we do have close relationships with our students for sure, but a lot of those conversations are around the curriculum, not about their personal life. Like that's almost even kind of like you don't talk. Now, what about downloading? Like if you ask them to download into a writing assignment or to take a picture of something in this space or, just some kind of modality download. What do you think about that?
I like both. I think that going back
Mm-hmm.
to the teacher point,
Mm-hmm.
the teachers that are involved in schools have to be able to quick pivot. It's not like historical education where this is the curriculum, this is what I'm going to teach, and this is how I'm going to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, when we were in school, SSD was in its own building, it was in its own space, but now it's inclusive. And then when we think about the
I didn't know
autism,
that.
it's on a spectrum. So autism, you have some students that are really mild, but are in your spaces and still think differently. And I would say get to moderate. We don't get too many on the far side of autism in general ed, but you may have some. So the teacher has to be skilled at, observing the classroom and being ready to pivot. So like you said, if you've got a group of students that say, I'm in a hailstorm, I'm super confused, you might want to start with in your coffee shop, how many of you have had a cup of coffee before? Like, do you know what things can go in coffee? Like what it should or shouldn't taste like? Do you know, like smelling, like there's, I usually start with just that background piece when I teach. I don't make any assumptions in my classroom. I'll give you a quick example. I did a leadership program with Inroads several years ago. And we were talking about Chick-fil-A in class. And believe it or not, a third of my students in this Inroads program had never had Chick-fil-A before. And so my partner teacher was like, what? And so as we're having eat more chicken, we're talking about why Chick-fil-A is, and we actually had to bring in Chick-fil-A. And so for some of us, we be like, Chick-fil-A is everywhere. It's on every corner. Like, who isn't eating Chick-fil-A? But you can't make those assumptions anymore. Chick-fil-A, you can say Chick-fil-A versus Cane's. Maybe your student has only had churches. So, like, teachers have to be adept and pivoting, not making assumptions about what their kids do or don't know, and not making them feel bad, like, oh my goodness, you never had Chick-fil-A before? Our thing was, oh, well, let's get everybody Chick-fil-A for lunch today.
I have so many ideas coming to my mind right now. Let's jump into the community-based learning really quick, since you touched on Chick-fil-A. What would the work that you do around business marketing, entrepreneurship, anything, what would that look like if they were at Chick-fil-A? So they're no longer in your traditional classroom setting. Now they're at Chick-fil-A. What does that look like?
So I think in an ideal circumstance, Chick-fil-A would need to be within community. So, within whatever their zip code is, so that it's meaningful, because this is something that's accessible to me. I can walk to it. I can, I don't have to have a car, right? And once they're inside of the establishment, it would go beyond just cooking the food. So there may be a session on how we prepare food, but there should be a session on how we train employees. There should also be a session on how to become a franchisee. There could be a session on Chick-fil-A corporate, how to work in the corporate space. So me coming in as a student, I'm not just learning how to be on the register or in drive-through. I now understand that there are many opportunities for me within the organization. I can grow. Right.
So they need to be able to have conversation, you think, with and ask questions, or maybe shadow, or be in the back with them while they're training. Maybe they don't touch any food, but they have a smock on. Maybe depending on the Chick-fil-A, they even have the ability to greet a customer, depending on what
Yeah.
angle they want to take to the experience.
And what you could do with the classroom of students, so let's say you have 12, right? You jigsaw it. When you jigsaw it, you give each one of them a role. So there'll be 3 that may be at their front entry level point that get that training, 3 that get the training of maybe district or how to become a franchisee, and then 3 that gets corporate training. So that's 9. But then they all come together and share their experiences, what they learned in those different spaces. So just because if we think about who's on our podcast right now, Tiffany I'm in the entry level, I'm at drive-through. I'm learning that piece. Tiffany, you learn how to become we all get the knowledge, right? They have a checklist of things and questions to ask. They all bring it back together. They assemble some type of informational document, like start here but end here, and that helps kids see it, because some kids don't try because they just don't see beyond where they are.
I love that. I
And
like the idea of having categories too, in terms of the ways that they can approach the environment and learn about business and marketing and entrepreneurship. The franchisee would be the entrepreneurship if they want to lean into that. I like that idea.
And so, and then if they can also do an educational piece to educate their community. So going back to your school, if you put all those 3 and then you say, okay, now the 9 of you guys are going to put together something to share with the community. So now the whole community is smarter about the offerings within the Chick-fil-A organization.
Joelle, this is so good. Like you shared so many amazing gems with us today. I love what you're sharing about, how they would incorporate their learning in a real Chick-fil-A. And as we close, Joelle, first of all, Dr. McIntosh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Welcome. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for giving me a platform to talk.
Yes, this is so good. What gives you hope about the future of education and the possibilities? Because University City High School, the way you're describing it internally, it doesn't look like anything like the traditional 1930s brick
No, ma'am.
traditional building on the outside. On the inside, you're getting a whole different experience. So what gives you hope about the future of education and the possibilities for reimagining how students learn?
So a couple things. I do every year. I used to do a lesson called Design the Perfect School. And I could do this. It was a kind of like the assignment you do at the beginning of the school year when you're trying to figure out who's going to be in your classroom and they trying to get the other things done. But I would always say to students, what did you need? If you think about yourself at any place on your journey, what did you need? And I push them to design something that gives them what they would have needed as a student. So secretly, I've been training these young educational advocates to think about what they needed and to go out into their own spaces and champion that, whether they do it as a teacher in classrooms. And I've really been pushing young men into classrooms to talk. I talk to them about, like, how many men did you have when you were in school? Did you not have any? Did you wish you had some? Why don't you be there for somebody else? Or just as parents to go into schools and say, hey, this isn't working for my kid. This is what my kid needs. So I've been secretly doing this for like 20 years, just pushing kids to be advocates for themselves and their own communities. And then, as you talked about, my school district, University City, or the school district of University City, led by Dr. Sharonica Hardin Bartley. And then my building is led by Michael Peoples. I just, everybody's on the bus. Everybody on the bus, everybody is, I'm sorry, maybe I'm in the boat and rowing in the same direction to doing what's right with kids. And I think where I want to end is a comment that Dr. Hardin Bartley says all the time. The work we do, we have to do what's right for kids. And if you are not here to do what's right for kids, then you might be in the wrong profession. She feels strongly about that. But all of us that stay, once you're there and you're about the work, that school district is about supporting the work and supporting the teachers and the students and the community by providing those things that are needed. And so that gives me hope. I say that we can't be the only one in the country working like this. There has to be other schools and other places, other educators that are passionate, who believe that teaching is their ministry, that are really about doing what's right for kids and communities all over this country. Urban education, poor educational systems, not everybody's rich, but really thinking about what is the next. I also think that we are raising a generation of very attuned young people who get it. They are thinking critically about what does and doesn't work and saying, we are here to do something about it. Like, we are not here to accept status quo. And I get great questions in my classroom. I'm always talking to young people inside and out of the classroom, and I'm getting just really thoughtful ideas about what life can look like. So that gives me hope.
I love that.
Up, and it keeps me in the classroom.
That. Attuned young people. Attuned.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Hold on. You are more than welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm here anytime.
Thank you for listening to Educate Us. Educate Us is a podcast and learning collective of TMS Visionary Group. All podcast content is protected by copyright. Copyright 2026 TMS Visionary Group, all rights reserved. New episodes are released every Monday. Thank you for joining the conversation.